place to keep us all healthy and loving one another. But we're not quite there yet. To get to true real time, we have to do a lot of work, not just on the front end, but on our back end systems. Here's a picture of my husband, Tim, on the balcony of a hotel in Spain. I put this picture in to remind myself of a very frustrating day that I spent last year booking this hotel, because I kept getting timed out over and over again. Our session time on the site was only 20 minutes, and I kept getting on the phone to call relatives in Spain to see if they could get together for dinner with us on the days that I wanted to come and stuff like that. And then in the end, my session would time out, and I'd have to go back and do a new search, and then the hotel that I was looking for wasn't available. Well, the frustration was to some good end, though, because at that time, the site was Orbitz, and I was working at Orbitz, and I was able to do something about it a bit. I went back and I talked with our database people and the developers. I put together a pizza party in a conference room and went out to Giordano's and got myself a whole bunch of pizza, got everyone together, and I said, why are our sessions so short? Why can't we just hold everybody in session indefinitely? And the answer I got was, well, it is to laugh. There are a number of very good reasons. One is, of course, if people are entering their credit card information, you don't want to have that session open indefinitely. Another is that Orbitz drew on a Byzantine collection of back-end resources for global distribution systems, for hotel inventory, air inventory, car inventory, and so forth, and then assembling all that on the back end. And if you and the data, prices and times and all that very quickly become stale. To keep continually refreshing that in a real-time way, you might have performance issues. So there's a lot of different reasons. So then the question is, how can you not frustrate the user with so frequent timeouts then? And another issue was, of course, I'm a woman over 50, which is the target demographic for these travel companies. But a lot of these sites were designed by young men and women in their 20s or 30s who do things more quickly and don't get on the phone possibly as much when they're planning travel. So in the end, what we did was we tried to pick off some key triggers on the site, that places where people would click and expect to see refreshed data, and then ask them at that point if they would like to see refreshed data. And furthermore, we refined that based on historical market behavior for key market segments. And if you were in that segment, and you'd be logged in, so we would know that, then we would give you that trigger. And we also incrementally increased session times to the limit of our performance abilities, so that we really optimized the whole system. I could go into a lot more detail, but that's just one story from the trenches of how we improved the user experience while the kludgy back-end systems remain pretty much the same, just by understanding the user behavior more, fine-tuning things, being more incremental, and doing some very careful analysis and decision trees. Okay, that's enough. It was nice looking at you, Tim, though. To do really brilliant work in working with temporal issues in the user interface, we need a whole toolkit of cognitive tools. It helps me to think about interaction design sort of like composing music, because a lot of the same fundamentals apply. Sequence, is the direction moving up or down? Rhythm, pacing, duration, and so forth. This is the the cover of the adventure game Myst, which I just used to love to play. And in this game, the player just explores the environment to see which causes are going to trigger which effects, and anything you do is pretty forgivable. So when we're designing, we want to ask ourselves this kind of question. What are our criteria for deciding when to make effects explicit and as discoverable as possible, and when is it important for us to make it fun, to make the effect something you can learn, and if you take an action and the effect is not what you wanted, to make that forgivable. We need to become masters of cause and effect. And this is an example of how I work with that. This is a typical process flow. This is I don't expect you to read all this again either, but just this is a process flow I designed for a single screen on a back-end system, just to try to tease out all the conditional steps in a process and what effects are triggered by which actions. And then here's a more traditional information architecture wireframe that I've annotated again to show the triggers and then the conditional effects that are caused by every trigger. Another tool that I use a lot for working with sequence is a cognitive task analysis tool called conceptual graphing. And in this tool, there are 6 different types of nodes connected with 18 types of arcs in a formal grammar to establish a semantic relationship. And this comes from research into storytelling and how people tell stories. And this is a hand-drawn example of a conceptual graph done by my friend Scott, who introduced me to this method. Typically, though, I use Visio, and we've developed a stencil that automates what are the allowed relationships. Are we designing a roller coaster or a tea party? What's the most efficient rhythm of work? What's the right pace? Is the user a novice? Then maybe we want a slower pace. If they're an expert, maybe you can step up the pace and also think about the rhythm. The mind can absorb no more than the seat of the pants can endure. So is a group of tasks something that someone can do in a single setting? Are you going to force somebody through a form lockstep so they just click next, next, next? Are you going to make people jump up to get stuff that they don't readily have at hand, interrupting the rhythm of their work? Are you going to interrupt them with interstitials here and there? If so, think about, the music of it. Another issue is the problem of duration. For example, in the field of travel, I don't think anyone successfully solved this issue of showing flights with their relative durations. And I don't mean for you to read the detail here again, but this is just a experiment that someone did when I was working at Orbitz to start to show the duration of the flight, the stopovers, the start time and the end time, any times between flights, time zone shifts, and so forth. When you go on to a travel site right now, you get a lot of textual data, and then you have to mentally interpret this in some way that makes sense to you so you can decide, what's my overall elapsed time? Or is this a red eye? Or so forth. Another time-related issue I ran across at Orbitz was that there wasn't a clear way of understanding the intervals in an itinerary. So I put together this diagram of flight components, slices, legs, stopovers, connections, and so forth, and how all of that comprised a single itinerary. Time gives us a context for understanding series of data. And time series visualizations show us how things change over time. You can look at patterns, rates of change? Are there any two variables that need to be studied together, and so forth? I'm not going to go into this because there's a lot of people, some even who are talking here this weekend, that if you're interested in this, you should check into on data visualization. Or you can read the work of Stephen Few, Ben Schneiderman, Edward Tufte, and there are more. Here's just one example from the work of Ben Schneiderman at the University of Maryland, where he worked on interactive time series display to show a person's medical history over the course of their lifetime. And each of these bars would be explodable when you clicked or hovered, and they would expand to show incidents in a person's medical history. And then finally, I'll just mention the issue of priority. Within a sequence, what should people do first? TurboTax gives you an implicit priority in this 3D time as an arrow diagram, moving from filing your federal and then your state and so forth till you hit the finish line. And you could also give the user an explicit priority of tasks by numbering items on a form, which is very commonly done. Or if you want to impose priority, then of course you could use a wizard interface where they simply can't go to the next step till they complete one. Speaking of wizards, here's another Tim the shaman from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And Tim says to his brave knights, "Follow only if ye be men," and I added women, "of valor." I like Esther Dyson's comment, "I've always done things I wasn't ready for." I tried to do that too. Whether or not you feel you have the skills or the background or the experience, I want you to be brave and help people connect across time zones, across cultures. I want you to invent new clocks, new calendars, new ways of keeping track of time. And the reason that I want you to do that is because then you can help people do what's really the most important to them and be the way people want to be. And what's most important to people, I believe, above all, we want to be loved by others, and we want to love. We want to relate with one another. We want to work, play, support our families, learn, grow, and do it together in goodwill. And above all, I think that my vision is of a computing world where we're helped to be that way, where we're not thinking, oh, well, now I'm using a computer, and now I'm in the cloud, and now I'm social networking, and, I want all of that to just fade into the background of our awareness so that we're just doing the things that we really want to do and connecting with one another. And the technology just becomes cognitively invisible, and that's what you and I can do. Time is our sandbox. We can expand time. We can make time fly for people. We can bring people together in the now zone to heal, to help, to have fun. This kind of work that we do may seem shamanic to some because we see a pattern where others only see a pile of rocks. I put together a little reading list, which I'm going to keep adding to, which is on my website, onemind.com. A lot of the books are pretty theoretical, but I try to put some practical ones in there too. But I don't see a whole lot of practical ones. So if some of you feel called to write some of those books, I would suggest that that would be a good market. Time and interaction design. And then I'm curious to get some feedback on my talk. You can go to SXSW Go, which is a downloadable app for your mobile devices, and rate this talk. And Also, if you'd like to go to my website and comment